we're starting the recording for the folks who really wanted to be here today and couldn't join us, and we'll send this out afterwards. So before we go into introductions, we are going to hear a land acknowledgement from Crystal.
So, Mikudamin Chin Kyohei, Nahal Pipi say, Mima Crystal, Mima Okanichi Saponi, Watiwa. So I just wanted to ground everybody in this event and welcome you guys to, I am physically on Okanichi Saponi, Sara, Sisapahal, Eno, and Saponi Tudelo lands. And then if you could put in the chat what lands you reside on. We are 8 state recognized tribes as well as Tuscarora. Welcome to wherever you are here in the internet, and just try to research in your area what local tribes are there now and what tribes were there, as just trying to learn about what's happening in your area. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Phoebe.
Thanks so much, Crystal. So also, if you're putting some things into the chat, and you want everybody to see it, then make sure you have checked panelists and attendees. If you just wanted to come to the panelists, then make sure you have just panelists marked. So let's go into introductions. April?
Hi, everyone. I'm April Jones of the Pinehurst Farmers Market and the Pinehurst Community Action Nonprofit. And I'm so happy to join you guys all today. If you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to put it into the chat. As Phoebe said, also, please let us know your name, your organization, your location, any other information you'd like to share in the chat. We would love to hear from you.
Great. April, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I run the Pinehurst Farmers Market in Columbia, South Carolina, and we've had the market for over 2 years. And so we're really a food access, food education, food justice organization. And then with the Pinehurst Community Action Nonprofit, I'm just working on improving food justice, food access, and farmer education in my community.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Phoebe Gooding. My pronouns are she, her, and I work for Toxic Free North Carolina. We're a statewide organization with the mission to advance environmental health and justice by advocating for safe alternatives to harmful pesticides and chemicals. And I manage the Just and Sustainable Agriculture Program, which promotes expansion of local regenerative agriculture, and that includes traditional and indigenous practices, as a solution to climate change, environmental and economic injustice, as well as an avenue for self-determination. In addition to my advocacy work at Toxic Free NC, I also own, along with my husband, a small farm in Durham called Hawk's Nest Healing Gardens. And I'm so excited to introduce Crystal Cavalier-Keck to speak with us today. Crystal is the co-founder of 7 Directions of Service with her husband. Currently, she is a national level organizer at Native Organizers Alliance. She's a citizen of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation in Burlington, North Carolina. Crystal and her husband own an indigenous garden, and I'm gonna let Crystal say the name.
It's Yesa Neda de Wahe Saponi Tudelo.
Thank you. And Crystal is an indigenous seed keeper with Braiding the Sacred and the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, and teaches how to preserve and perpetuate our traditional varieties of sacred corn. She holds gatherings to connect leaders and budding seed keepers around the central roles of corn and other traditional foods that are vital to the health of our communities. Crystal is currently working on her doctorate at the University of Dayton, and her dissertation is on social justice of missing, murdered Indigenous women and gas oil pipelines in frontline communities. And her bio keeps going. She is the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee for the NAACP, a board member of the Haw River Assembly, a member of the 2020 fall cohort of the Sierra Club's Gender Equity and Environment Program and Women's Earth Alliance, accelerator for grassroots women environmental leaders. And she is amazing. And we're so, so grateful to have you here today. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, thank you so much. You guys, you said it a lot. So thank you so much. You got all my environmental stuff. So that's good. Oh, I do want to add that I am with Omega and Brenda of the West End Revitalization Association here in Mebane, because we need to tackle these issues of Black and Indigenous communities and try not to get ran over by the local government. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I don't think we said it in here, but Crystal's also a mom, and I just want to raise that up. So for sure. Okay, so yeah, we're here today to talk about Indigenous seed keeping and food sovereignty. And, you know, so I know, from what I know, La Via Campesina has been credited to bring this term food sovereignty sort of to the mainstream. And they say that food sovereignty is about systemic change. It's about human beings having direct democratic control over the most important elements of their society. It's how we feed and nourish ourselves, how we use and maintain the land, water, and other resources around us for the benefit of current and future generations, and how we interact with other groups, peoples, and cultures. And I just want to hear from you, Crystal, you know, like, how do you define or describe food sovereignty? What does that mean for you?
So for me, food sovereignty, and I'm going to put an Indigenous framework around it. So it's in your Indigenous nation or community, you're able to control your own food system, and you food produce resources free of control or limitations put on by an outside power such as the government. You're able to just be able to be free and grow the foods that you need to without having the restrictions. So that's what food sovereignty means to me, just being free to do whatever you want to do with your food, right? You know, like I give an example, when we grow our corn, we have people who rent our crops, like our farm. Like my cousin has a farm that butts up to ours, and so they rent out their plots of land. And so the guy who rents it is a commercial corn grower, and so we have to worry that his corn might pollinate with ours, and if he's growing a particular variety that's like controlled by Bayer or Monsanto, they'll come and take it. And that, you know, it's just colonized ways. And then therefore they take our seeds, and so that's just a form of control. So that's what I think food sovereignty means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
And then, well, I don't know. April, you got you want to add anything?
I mean, I am with you 100%. I think all you said was wonderful, fabulous. And I do think that it's so important to think about, like you said, like seed sovereignty and how it relates to who has control over the food system, right? And so if we, the people, don't have access to seeds because they're all monetized, then that's a problem. And if we can't save our seeds, that's a problem, because we're losing, you know, traditions, history, crops. That's really important. And then also being able to save your seed is such autonomy, and saying, this is the seed I like. You know, this is a watermelon that I like. We're eating watermelons in South Carolina right now. And there's so many different types. You know, there's like the seedless kind, there's the yellow kind, there's the, you know, bright red, sort of pink. You know, there's so many varieties. And so you can make the decision and say, this is the kind of watermelon that I like. This is what my family likes. This is particular to our taste. And if you can't save the seed, or you don't have access to that seed, that's a huge problem. And so, especially with COVID, you know, we've seen that you can't always trust our institutions to always be available. And then when there's a storm, when there were the storms in Texas, you know, there wasn't access to the grocery store. And there's climate change right now. California has a really, really high heat wave temperatures that are going throughout the West. That's going to affect our farmers and the access to food. So
Right.
seeds are vital, like you said. They're so important.
They are. When you were talking, it reminded me of when we grow our seeds. We've been growing traditional corn for the last 4 years. And, it takes a really long time for the Tuscarora white corn to grow. And so one of the elders was telling us how it was ready and how it will look. So if you imagine a corn cob and you have it broken down into thirds, and the top half is what the birds pick off, right? So we're feeding the bird relatives. And then the middle part is what we save for ourselves. And then the last part is what we save for future seeds. So like, I have some Mohawk red. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll take out a couple of pieces. And this is what, we've saved. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see it? My fingers are in the way. This is what we've saved. And actually it's true. Like, when I was with my husband last year, when we were saving our corn, we started looking for the signs of the birds, right? And if the birds were eating it, we know that crop is healthy. And then if we don't, be quick, and if we're not too lazy, if we're not quick, and they'll eat up all of our crops. So we had to get out there and start saving it. And that's what we want to do, is to teach people kind of how to go back to that, traditions, because again, what you grow is tied to your health. And it's just real important that we teach people how to do these things, and just start to save. And, you can do this stuff all over the place. You can do it in a container garden. Like the first year we grew a small Tutelo corn in planters. We had a big, huge planter, like a big 5-gallon. And it actually, I didn't think it was going to do, but it did really good. But it was it wasn't a really tall corn, but it did work. So yeah. So thanks, Phoebe. Good question.
Yeah. And, just something that you were saying, just what stayed with me so much was talking about how we have to be accountable to each other, so your cousin rents out the land. And so what they plant, it's important because that impacts what you're planting. And then you brought it to like this even bigger place of remembering that we're also planting for our other relatives and, the birds and the other animals, the pollinators, so, just like, yeah, when you said that, I was like, yeah, it's so important that this, piece of sovereignty is also an accountability to each other and community, to the earth. And yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah.
So my question for you is that the Seeds Keepers Network says that seeds are vital. They're the vital foundation for food sovereignty and the basis for healthy agriculture. And they're our collective inheritance. So can you talk about the difference between seed keeping and then seed saving?
Sure. So growing up, as a member of my community, first of all, let me just say, we knew we were Indigenous, but we didn't talk about it. Like it was just taboo. You just didn't talk about it. It was really racial where I lived here in Pleasant Grove. And we just went into the Black community, right? Nobody talked about the person with light skin, green eyes, blue eyes, blonde hair, but you all went in the Black race. So we didn't talk about being Native. I tended to my family's garden with my grandparents. They were farmers. They came from a line of farmers on my mom and my dad's side. And, we would practice these traditional Indigenous gardening methods, such as using like fish guts as fertilizer. We also used, cow manure, things like that. And then we were saving kernels from the white corn. And I didn't really know why. Like every year my grandfather would plow the field, and then we would plant the corn. And then towards the end of the summer, we would harvest it. And my grandmother, we would blanch the corn, and then we would put it in our freezer, right? But we also had corn that we would dry and we would save so we could regrow it. And, it was a learned teaching experience. I was really never taught why we do these things. Like, I always wondered, like, why did we save the corn silk? And, why were some corn kernels eaten and others were saved? And then, I just didn't ask. But years later, after working with like Fix Kane from Alliance of Native Seed Keepers and Rowan White, listening to her talks, and then Angela from Braiding the Sacred, learning as a professional seed saver and Indigenous seed keeper and gardener, just working with these Indigenous cultures, we're trying to return to our tribal food systems. And you're right, the pandemic has prompted so many people to return to growing their own food because, we were stuck at home for this last year, and, it's piqued a lot of interest in people. And so it's illuminated the lack of seed at the community level, right? So that has prompted people to start growing food and to save their seeds. And what I've noticed was, if you go to like Food Lion or a grocery store and you pick up like a tomato, right? You're like, oh, I'm gonna save these seeds. Sometimes those seeds don't produce. And, I learned that these growers genetically modify their food to where it makes the fruit sterile or the vegetable sterile, so you can't produce from those seeds. And so, like I was saying, I started working with Braiding the Sacred and Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, which are intertribal organizations understanding these traditional seed practices. And we were invited to a couple of their gatherings. What I have noticed, it was difficult working with local tribes to engage in seed saving conversations, but through this organization that I was lucky to be a part of, was called Native Leadership Institute here in Chapel Hill. I was in cohort number 3, and I was able to reach out to the members of my cohort and share the seeds that were gifted to me for like information sharing and seed sharing. And during one of the Unity Tribal conferences a couple of years ago, I was partnered with Angela, and that's really how I met her. And we co-facilitated a workshop on food sovereignty and health. And, it's just so important. And then after coming home and talking to a few elders in the community, I've heard that seed knowledge was just held by a few older people. And, older people are starting to pass away, and they don't pass that knowledge down. And so, I started getting interested in that and just trying to learn enough about traditional seeds so that we can feed the community, right? So like every year, my husband and I would keep adding like 4 or 5 more raised beds to our garden. And, my goal is to teach at least communities and members in my community how to seed keep and how to eat, but also how to save the seeds to where they don't rot or, they don't get any type of mold on them, and to where it's enough to share with the community that they live in. So, we have these little seed things, and, I learned a lot from my cousin Fix. He's so knowledgeable on all of these different types of things that are, I guess, native to North Carolina, like the pawpaw and I guess black walnut and a couple of other like things that people, I guess they will call them weeds, or, that now they're kind of like a delicacy. Like, before, I remember my grandma being like, don't eat the dandelion, but now everybody's like drinking dandelion tea and eating dandelions. But back in the day when I was growing up, they were like, oh, that's a weed. And then, my husband also told me, he was like, have you ever noticed that the medicine that you need the most grows closest to you? So if you go outside, you might see broadleaf plantain or dandelion growing, or we have a lot of henbit and chickweed that grow in our yard every year. I mean, it just grows bountiful in our yard. And so I just implore people to just stop and look at these things. Getting back to the story, my mother's grandparents and great grandparents, they tended to their own farms, like I said, but they experienced agricultural racism. And, we lived in an industrial society. We had a lot of mills here. We lived close to the river. And so there was a lot of forced relocation because there was a lack of work growing up in the 40s and 50s. And they started to change their mentality from an agricultural farming society to more of a working in the mills. And then eventually the children were like, okay, we need to get an education because there was no jobs left here for them. So a lot of them pushed them and their children away from the land. And, you know, I kept wondering like why I had this calling to the land. Like I remember growing up, being in high school, being like, oh, I can't wait to leave Pleasant Grove. Like it's nothing out here. And then, you know, I went out into the world and I lived in different places. Like we lived in Kansas, we lived in Texas, we lived down here in the south part of North Carolina at Fort Bragg. And, you know, each location taught me something. And then when I moved to the city of Washington, D.C., and I had this great job, like, I mean, I was living the life. But what you know, I just kept saying, like, I really miss being at home. You know, I really didn't understand the idea of having no land. Like you have this nice house, but you don't have any land, right? Like you don't see any grass. You don't see anything. You just see cement. And I was like, this is not a way for my kids to live. And so we moved back home, and I never understood it until maybe a couple of months ago. My husband told me the story of Otiwate. And of course I had to Google it because I'm like, what does that mean? And there was this just one article that talked about Otiwate, and that was the place where your mother broke water. And so you kind of have a tie to that land. And not everybody has Otiwate, but it certainly makes me understand why people don't leave the area, even though they live in dire conditions and they're poor or, you know, they're lacking things. They have a tie to that land. And, you know, I feel a tie to that. Also, you know, within Indigenous and tribal food systems, the pandemic, you know, it's just prompted us to return to our food, growing our own food. And so, yeah, with colonization and people colonizing us here on the East Coast, you know, people fail to realize these impacts of acculturation and colonization and assimilation and relocation. It has impacted all of us, right? Whether we were African or Indigenous, it, you know, impacted our ability to be on the land. And we have trauma associated with that disconnect, and we have to heal. And I do look at gardening now as my healing. It's like my reconnection back to the land. And on the garden that we have, my husband and I, you know, we have our raised beds and we're growing berries and raspberries and strawberries. We also have sunflowers. I just looked today, we didn't plant sunflowers. They just came back from the sunflowers we had last year. And it is beautiful to wake up and see this field full of sunflower heads just smiling at you. And then, you know, I was not really a good farmer with lettuce. Like it would always bolt or go bad or whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I got into this urban farm, tower gardening farm, and it is actually working. I have 3 tower gardens and vertical tower gardens, and it's aeroponics, and it is the most amazing thing ever. Like it took maybe 3 weeks to get fresh vegetables, and we have these. I've never tasted lettuce so fresh. And I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm just like, wow, this is so unique. Like, I wish my grandparents could see and touch how we're growing now, because these things are like vertical and instead of it being horizontal. So, I mean, you know, it's really amazing. And, you know, someone asked me, what does it mean to be a good ancestor and a responsible descendant at the same time? And I always tie it back to, you know, digging in the earth and being able to be a responsible person and teaching my children how to be able to sustain themselves in case, you know, we do have to fall back on these hard times. So thank you for indulging me in my story, y'all.
Totally. And I was wondering too, like, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the work you do with youth and children, and how do you, you know, perpetuate, you know, and keep these seeds going, and how are you, you know, you all connecting the youth for seed keeping?
So so before the pandemic started, my husband and I, we started out with this Indigenous stickball team. And I was like, I need something for my son to do, right? Like we came from Washington, D.C., and he was playing Little League. But when we got here, you know, we signed him up for Little League, but there was not enough children in our community to form a team for him to play on. And I'm just like, he just can't sit here. So, I was like, Jason, we looked at lacrosse, and I was like, that's a really interesting sport. I would love for him to play it. But when you think of lacrosse, right, I think of rich white children, right? And I'm just like, what? This is an indigenous sport? Get out of here. I can't believe that. So I started to learn a lot about lacrosse. And then I went down this rabbit hole. And then I learned my tribe, we played stickball. And it was like two different forms of, you had two different sticks, very different sticks from lacrosse. The lacrosse has like a big head and it has like the net, but we have these just regular sticks, and it's like this little head. I can't even describe it, but it's enough to cradle a little leather ball. And so we learned all we could about it. We started playing stickball. Now, I'm not a very athletic person. My husband is, but it takes a lot of skill. And so we formed a lacrosse team, and we made it open to everybody. And one of our former board members, she passed away. She got her grandchildren involved. And, my husband, we would go out and we would teach this like every other Saturday morning. And we would teach the traditions of how to play stickball. But we also taught the traditions of how to play lacrosse, because we want the students to be able to use these skills in school. So that way they can have a sports scholarship. And we made it open to, girls, boys, two-spirits, anybody who wanted to play, as young as 5 and as old as 99. If you could get out there and you wanted to play, you can play. So we started doing that, and it started to take off. We really are looking to get another stickball league going again. And we've mingled with some Cherokee, some Lumbees, and some Catawba, that if we can get enough people on our league, we can actually go and start playing this. And this is a really good sport. The history of this sport, it's called the little brother of war. And so it's an alternative to going to war, right? You just settle your disadvantages or your just disagreements on this lacrosse field. That is a pretty brutal sport. So I don't know if I would want to do that, because you get whacked with sticks and stuff like that. But it's really good to see youth involved in their culture. And then we also taught them the importance of a healthy diet, right? Like when you eat fresh things that you grow, your body produces so much more. My husband just came home from this young men's weekend, and he was talking about this diet that he ate, and they were free from sugar, any type of preservatives. It was just a natural diet. And he said his body was so good. They detoxed from these foods, these chemicals that we're eating. He was able to detox from that. And I think that is so important, because that's a really natural lifestyle that we should be trying to do. But it's so difficult because they put these fillers and these additive things in there that makes us addicted to it, like addicted to sugar.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of things that we're addicted to. So
yeah,
we're just trying to help students understand. And then if we can help them change their eating habits, we feel that we can help them get rid of some of these ailments, whether it's food allergies or autoimmune diseases, things like that. So yeah.
That's an awesome way to connect to the kids of, starting with, playing games, and how does your body feel? How do you fuel yourself? How do you fuel your body? And what are you eating? And how are you eating healthy? And then, to go from there, like, what is healthy? So thank you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
We had a question about the name of your organization, and if you could tell the Tuscarora snake story and the Longhouse connection to Martin Chapel. So
do you know who that question was from? The Tuscarora snake story?
Who's that question from? Oh my God.
Jason Keck.
Look at my husband throwing me up under the bus. My goodness. Okay, so look at you, Jason, my number one supporter. So the snake story is really hilarious. So when I was growing up, and it's again, going back to these traditions, we didn't know why we did this, but it was always a thing, right? Whenever we saw a black snake or a snake, you would cut the snake's head off and throw it up in the tree, right? And it would bring rain. Like they were like, oh, if you want it to rain, just throw a snake in the tree. And so we would always do that, like kill a snake and throw it in the tree, like if we saw it, because, we equated, snake as bad things, but, black snakes are really good. So don't go killing these snakes. But, we would try to keep the snakes away from our chickens and things like that, because, the snakes would eat the eggs. So, whatever, we would throw it up in there. And so I was telling my husband the story. And then when we went to go visit my cousin Fix, he was talking about the story of the snake, and you would throw it in the tree. And that was like an offering for the Thunderbird to come down and take this offering and then take it back up to the creator. And then usually the creator will be so happy he would make it rain. So that's like I guess, we still do these types of traditions, but they just get covered up, right? Because of, Christianity and, taboo-ness and things like that. But that's still like a direct tie to it. And then, Martin's Chapel and the Tuscarora Longhouse. So in our community, we have these churches, which was Martin's Chapel and Jeffrey's Cross. And when we had, what is his name? He's a professor from A&T. Dr. Smallwood. He came out, I was reading some of his work talking about the Tuscarora in Bertie County. And, I invited him to come out to our place and just to meet him, because I really wanted to meet him, and because, I had read his work. So my husband and I, we met him, and then we took him on a tour of Pleasant Grove. And we stopped by the Martin's Chapel, which is one of my family's churches. And he was asking me about the church. And Martin's Chapel Church, we have our little front where you walk in, but then you had on the side where like the deacons come in on one side and then the women would come in on the other side. And he was like, well, that's kind of like the Longhouse, which is a spiritual connection for, the Tuscarora or anybody in the Haudenosaunee culture. And the men would come in on one side and the women would come in on the other side. And they totally sit separately based on their clans or, their their clan systems in their, whether they're male or female. And so that is what he means when he's talking about how Tuscarora kind of influenced, so we would kind of secretly embed these indigenous practices in our ways of life as a way to maintain our culture while still hiding, because, we were persecuted for being indigenous people. If we didn't go on the Trail of Tears, we were still here. And we just had to blend into the society. And so while blending in, we became assimilated. And, after a while, people tend to forget these things because, for the sake of surviving, our ancestors thought it would be great, right, to just assimilate. And so now we're having this revival of a culture. And what I'm really hoping to do with Jason and my family is kind of awaken this culture, because we do have a lot of Afro-Indigenous as well as white Native people who have simply forgotten who they are or where they came from because their ancestors were just trying to survive. And so now we're going through this thing and we're just having this revitalization of culture or rematriation of the ways that we used to live, because honestly, I can say that if we go back, minus the nice conveniences like air conditioning, but if we could go back to the ways that we're living and be more of a community and stop being so capitalistic, we could return to these ways of protecting the people, because it is about the people and it's about the community and it's about working together as a whole. Because now, I don't know if you guys see this, but if you step back and look at the big picture, you see more of a what about me mentality instead of a what about us. And if we could go back to what about us, it takes a community to raise, your family. If you fall on hard times, Phoebe, I could come to you and say, hey, do you have something that you could share with me to my family to help me get through? And if we could go through, return to those ways instead of people being like, well, I don't know, I don't want to be involved in that. People just look down on people when they fall on hard times. And it's the roller coaster of life. We all go through these things, ups and downs. And if we have to learn to work together. So that's what I feel that indigenous gardening and indigenous seed keeping and just seed keeping, like, Black farmers and things like that. If we can return to that way of living and stop trying to like be capitalistic, I think we'll make it. So yeah.
That's a great answer. So how do you think that your stories, your traditional stories, relate to seed keeping? Are there some stories that relate directly or influence the seed keeping practices?
There are stories, like most of the stories that I've been told probably were from my husband or my cousin Figs. And those stories are just about, being humble, not wasting things, right? Like you don't throw things out. And so that's how I'm thinking that they tie together, right? Because it's teaching us a lesson, or it's teaching us a value, right? Of, just not wasting things, and not getting so bogged down or so involved in a lot of things that you miss the joys of life, right? And so that's how I think those indigenous, those ways are coming back. And then you kind of just have to sit still, right? And I know we're in this fast-paced society and I'm seeing a lot of things, but if you could just have a moment to just sit still and just listen to what's happening around you, I really do feel that your ancestors can talk to you, and most of our ancestors are here, going 7 generations back. And if you just have to sit still and get quiet. And I mean, it's very difficult for me because I'm always on the go, and I've been trying to like take things back, be like I can't be so busy because I need to value the time with my family and my friends. And so like, I'm like, okay, I used to be like, oh, I need to do all this, but now I'm just like, okay, I'm going to let you handle some things and just call me when you need me, but I'm still here. So those stories that we're told, I think are just ways to help you live your life a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, you just mentioned always being on the go. So I know that you do a lot. I've been following your work on the Mountain Valley pipeline, and resisting that pipeline coming through the land from Virginia down into North Carolina. And you've been doing so much, sending petitions out, organizing a walk and a hike, and even folks were kayaking down the river, down the proposed route. So yeah, just, if anything you want to share about pipelines and, other energy projects that can be a threat to food sovereignty.
Yeah, so it's real good. So, right, we have these environmental degradations that are happening in our communities, right? And people rarely see the side effects of these waste treatment facilities or these landfills that are usually put in Black and brown communities, right? Because, if you're rich and you're powerful, you have a lot of money, you can make those things go away, not be in your neighborhood, right? Because you don't want to live close to that. So that's usually put in the Black and brown communities. And, I mean, it's horrible because we are stuck with these decisions that are being made for us. And, we have to build this collective power. So I'm seeing all of these organizations. And if we could ever just start to work together and build unity and be on the same page, then we can be like, hey, we're not taking this anymore. And so this has happened with the Mountain Valley pipeline. This is happening with this hot asphalt plant that's coming through up here where we live. There's this stinking highway called 119. I live on 119, but they're making this dumb bypass, all because they want to increase this capitalistic society. They're building up these big industrial warehouses, right? That house, I think, Lidl and Aldi and Walmart and Chick-fil-A and all of these hubs are coming here. And I'm just like, you guys need to just stop. It's like, the more you do, the more you may do. Like my grandma would say that to me, right? Like the more you do, the more you may do. And I'm just thinking that it's like people just have to have this need or this immediacy, right? Like people want it now. Like, you know, and, you know, I'm even like that now. Like, I'm like, I remember when we would mail order something and it would take a week to get here, but now we got Amazon Prime and doggone it, I want my Amazon the next day, right? Like, you know, like we're just in this, like, we got to have it now mentality. And I don't know where it came from. And so what I see with working with Omega Wilson and working with the Haw River Assembly, and then Jason and I, we formed this organization called 7 Directions of Service to talk about these degradations that are happening, because these are coming through our communities. And, you know, we just can't pack up and move, right? Like I told you, I have a tie to this land. Like, my ancestors were born here, their ancestors were born here, and I don't want to move, right? Like, I have lived other places and I just feel comfortable being at home. Like, I could have no power and I will be okay, because you know why? I'm sitting on my land. And I just feel a connection. Like, I just, you know, my grandparents were here. I have good memories. And, you know, these pipelines, these corporations are just coming through. And, you know, people always say, well, they're bringing jobs. They might say that they're bringing jobs, but really they're not bringing jobs. They're bringing people from out of state that are already have these jobs. They're putting strains on our communities as far as like law enforcement, fire, rescue, because these people are doing these bad things to people. You have more crime rates that go up. You have a lot of assaults, you have a lot of rapes, and you have a lot of unsolved murders. And that's putting a strain on that community. And people are being bought, like they're being paid off. And, you know, we live in this society, like, if you give somebody like $30,000, they're like, wow, that's a lot of money. I could do a lot with $30,000. But they don't see that after they go through that $30,000 and they pay all the tax on it, they're left with, you know, cancer. They're left with a generation. They're left with this pipeline or this asphalt that you can't grow on. And it's killing your food, right? And now the hunters who are hunting, these animals have these cancers and these things, and you know, you're eating this, the fish have it. So it's now embedded into our culture, and we can't fix that. And so, you know, we have to see, or we have to show that these politicians that we elect, they have to represent us, and they have to represent us in a good way when it comes to foods, when it comes to jobs and corporations and things like that. They need to know that, you know, we get them elected, and they need to start coming back home and living like regular people. So I know that's my soapbox. But the petition, you know, yeah. I need help. I need 25,000 signatures. So I need each of you guys to like send it out to 20 people, because we need 25,000 signatures, because the only way we can move President Biden and his administration is we have to flex our muscles. And we showed them this last election that we flexed our muscles, right? Because we had historic numbers of people going out to vote. And I mean, it is, you know, people are scared of our Black and brown collective power, and we really have to stand up and work together. So yeah.
Yeah, you said it. You said we have to build unity. And so just, yeah, you know, just thinking about that, you have the petition. We can definitely, let's see if we can find it and put it in the chat now, but also we will send out resources. And so people can sign that petition that will go directly to President Biden. And also you said you're working with the West End, is it West End Revitalization? And and yeah, so when, you know, just, yeah, you know, just staying on that, the building unity theme, just like, what are other ways that people can
so like action? Well, there's Karen Bearden from Triangle 350, then we have the Raging Grannies. You know, we all have these little pockets of things that we're doing, but I see us coming together, right? We have this event that's happening on August the 28th. I'm not quite sure what it is. Just mark your calendars. We're having like this Indigenous Rising gathering, right? We're going to just let people know that we're here and we're not going to take it anymore. Especially when it comes to this pipeline, because they got too much of this junk, right? Like just stop. Like, we don't need any more of this. Then on October the 24th through November the 4th, we're doing an 11-day water walk. And it's like 330 miles, but we're going from the headwaters of the Haw River to the Atlantic Ocean. And we're bringing awareness about the river because the river is sick. And I just want to say that water is what connects us all, right? Like we are made of water. We are birthed in water. Our mothers carry us in water. You know, we are water, right? And then when the water is sick, you have to take care of it because without it, we will die. And people don't understand that. Like, you know, they get this stuff, right? This filter, but when you put like chemicals in it, you can't filter all of that out.
Yeah.
And you know, we have to just, you know, stop. And like all of these water sources are connected. So like, you know, when it goes up in the air, so you have methane or whatever you blow off into the air, it goes up into the clouds, it rains down, it falls into our groundwater, which goes into our well water, which we drink. And then now we're drinking poisons and toxins that people are like, oh, I live miles away from a coal ash plant, or I live miles away from a nuclear facility. Yeah, that stuff travels, and now you're drinking it. And now you have this rare thyroid cancer or prostate cancer or some type of cancer that you don't know where you got it from. But have you thought that maybe the skin that you have is very porous? So maybe you're putting it on you when you take a shower or in your bath. And so people have to understand that all of these things are interconnected. The animal people, the plant people, even the little bug people. You know, my husband told me I have a war with the bugs, and I'm trying really hard. I just don't like bugs, but I'm trying really hard to, you know, not kill the bug people. But we're all related, right? Like I just learned yesterday, there's this beetle. It's like some star beetle out in the Dakotas that uses the stars to navigate. I mean, that's amazing. So yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the bugs, someone asked, I'm going to put a couple questions into kind of one because the time is going by so quickly. So one question is, how do you get kids involved in gardening? Any tips or techniques? And then for communities developing a garden, do you have any things like specific that you think would be good to plant? And then there's a question for you about cedar apple rust and the non-chemical way to get rid of it. So I just want to put that out there.
Oh, who said that? Which one?
That one's for me. The cedar apple rust question. Let me get back to you from Toxic Free and see.
Okay.
We'll get back to that.
Well, you know, I don't know. Okay. One, with getting the kids involved. So this is the thing. When you have like a seed, right? Like, so I have probably the most addicted to computer kids ever, right? Like my son is on Roblox, and I don't know.
We all do.
So what I do is, you know, we have this tower garden. So I don't know if you've ever seen this vertical tower garden. And we planted them, right? And I showed my son, like from beginning, we planted these things in our little rock bowl, and you see them grow, right? And now I'm just like, okay, today we went out there this morning and I said, hey, we're going to harvest, right? And so I got my kids out there for like 30 minutes. I let them play in the water, and this 13-year-old, even my 16-year-old came in, my 20-year-old, and they were playing in the water, helping me harvest. And the thing is, helping them, let them get their hands dirty or pick the berries, and then be like, okay, this is what you grew. So just helping them get involved in it. That's how I help my kids get in it and let them see the benefits of what we planted, right? And let them eat it, because I'm telling you, eating a berry that you grew is I don't know, it just tastes better. Maybe it's all in my brain, but it tastes much better than the ones I get from the store.
No, it's true. It's not in your brain. It's sweeter. Yeah. And okay, somebody did ask about the walk from the headwaters of the Haw. Is there a way we can get that information into the chat? Otherwise, we'll definitely send it out afterwards with the file.
I want to say, I think it's called, I have a Facebook group. It's called Haw River to the Atlantic, and I'll share it.
Okay.
In the chats. It's to all panelists and attendees, right?
Okay, great.
That's our group. You can join us there. You can learn more about that, about the walk there. It's being planned now, and it is 11 days, and we're looking for teams of people to walk together. I have a great core team who's helping me organize it. You know, we are a village and I love them so much. And they're helping me out. So yeah.
Great. And actually, yeah, we have another question about advice for communities who are developing a community garden. They've done the outreach on what residents want to see, but deciding sort of where and what to plant is next.
So when you work with the community, so I work with this really wonderful elder named Ramona Big Eagle, and she is the one who got me in the tower garden. But what we do is when we go out to communities, we just ask them what is best for them, like what is easiest for them to grow. And so we are developing a tower plan for a community garden. And the best thing to grow that we see that grows quickly are like lettuces, bok choy, cilantro, and dill. Just something that you can make a salad with. Oh, and basil. It's when you make it all together, it's really tasty, and you can eat it within like 3 weeks because it grows really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I would add to that. I mean, I think if you have a small garden space to, you know, put in things that you're going to get continuous yields from. So, you know, your squashes like zucchini, summer squash, okra, greens. You don't have to harvest a whole head at once. You can you know, continuously harvest the leaves. So that's what I think, you know, about that in a small garden space. But
and you guys could follow me on Facebook. I'll find
awesome.
my Facebook link and put it in here. But you know, we're just growing different things. Just trying to be trendy, trying to keep it relevant, trying to keep it natural and organic, because that is what it's about, right? Natural and organic.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so we have I think we lost April, maybe some, you know, technology connection. It happens. So, but yeah, we, you know, just hearing about the work with the Haw River to the Atlantic, that's in the chat now. There's oh, maybe we'll try to fix that. But there is the petition to President Biden. You can sign a couple other things that we put into the chat. I love just these, you know, conversations around slowing down, connecting. I think, like, you know, the big piece of walking away today for me is like this building unity, you know, and just something you were saying about all these little organizations, which I appreciate. We only have so much capacity, you know, each of us, you know, but how do we just connect one or two people then from that, you know, and keep that going? And yeah, you know, because we are stronger together.
We are. And I feel I'm just telling you, when we start working together and helping each other, networking together, you can do so much more. So like I always do this analogy of like, if you have one arrow, right, it's easily broken. But when you have like a bundle of arrows, you cannot break that. And when you have a group of people and you're united, you can't break that, right? Like, of course, you're going to have disagreements, but you know, you learn to work through those things because you know, you don't walk away from people. You learn to stick it out. And, you know, that's what I see when you build a community. You have to learn to work together. And I mean, it is a relationship building process. And then when you build that, you're growing stuff together. And then you can share things, corn, beans. I remember my grandparents, they used to have that, a corn shucking thing. God, I don't even know what you call it, but they pile in these like big, massive things and they divide it up in the community. So unity, that's it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Omega.
Well, thank you so much, everybody who joined us today. I don't know if there's anything else you just wanted to add, Crystal.
You guys find me on Facebook, CA Cavalier. You know, let's do something. Let's build some unity. Let's build some community programs, something. Let's get together. And then, you know, I'll see you out there on the gardening trail. How about that?
Yeah, awesome. Well, we are going to send out just pretty much everything we talked about. So we'll get this information out in the next couple of days. But so everyone can sign those petitions, share them, find Crystal on Facebook, ways that we can connect and support your work and support other work of folks that are working on food sovereignty. And we're excited because this is just the first of the series. Thank you, Crystal, for opening this up with a land acknowledgement and, and your presence and being here. This is the first of the series that will continue on the last Thursday of every month from now through October. And our next conversation, we're going to highlight April, who's our co-facilitator today.
Hey, April.
Yeah, and April Jones, introduced herself as a founder of the Pinehurst Community Farmers Market in the community of Pinehurst in Columbia, South Carolina. And so she's going to talk about farmers markets and healthy food access and how she started the farmers market in her community on July 29th. Same time, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. So please share that out. And we love to connect with folks. I mean, all of our organizations, all of us as people want to connect with anybody who has been on here today. So if you have more follow-up questions for Crystal, for 7 Directions of Service, if you have more questions for April with Pinehurst Community Action and Pinehurst Farmers Market, if you have more questions for Phoebe, me here at Toxic Free North Carolina, reach out to us. We'll definitely be following up with all of our emails and all of our information, but this is how we do it. This is how we come together. We have conversation. We learn from each other. We share knowledge. It is a give and receive. It is not just one way. It's back and forth. And that's a continual process, just like the season. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much, Crystal, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, and I'll see you guys soon, okay?
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.